So now we're going to be working on line 5A. We can ignore line 4. It says if no wages, tips, or other compensation are subject to Social Security and Medicare. So there are a few unusual cases where um, certain certain types of wages are not taxable at all by Social Security or Medicare. Those are rare, and that does not apply in this problem. So we're going to move to line 5A. It says taxable Social Security wages. So, just a reminder, what we're looking for, that's just another way of saying wages taxable for OSTI. So it's all the amounts the employees made under 102,000. So to calculate that, we go back to our pay data. So back in October, now remember this 941 is a quarterly report, so it's only going to cover October, November, and December. So back in October, was anyone over 102,000? No. So all of this 10,140 was taxable. So I'm going to create, in Excel, I've created a taxable OSTI by month. So October, all of it is taxable, 10,140. So let's look at November. Was anyone over the 102,000 in November? No. So all of this month's gross wages is taxable. So I plug that into my taxable OSTI by month table. Okay, and then December, or that pesky December, and that pesky Pam Adams, she was over. So do you remember we had to go and create that graph to calculate how much of her 4250 was taxable? So let me go back to Excel where I had the taxable. So what we did is we figured out of her 4250 paycheck, this is her paycheck in green, only the part below the 102,000, only the part from 102,000 to the previous pay of 98,880 is taxable. So we figured out 3120 was taxable for her OSTI. And then, so we created this chart. What was taxable for December for OSTI? So we got 3120 for Pam, and all of Jim's 3,800 and all of Dave's 4,400 are taxable. Why? Because they're both under 102,000. So we add up this and we get 11,320 is taxable for December. So then we add 11,320 for December's taxability. Now we can add up these three numbers and we get 32,110, and we're going to plug it down here in column 1, line 5A. So it was a lot of work to figure out how much was taxable for OSTI. I already forgot the number. It was 32,110. Let me move this over here. Close this. So we got 32,110. Okay, and then it says multiply by basically 12.4%. 12.4% is the same as the decimal equivalent of 0.124. So why are we multiplying Social Security by 12.4% instead of 6.2? Because this form is having us calculate the employee portion, 6.2, plus the employer portion, 6.2, at the same time. So that's why we're multiplying by 0.124. So when we do the math, we get 3981.64. So this should be close to what we calculated earlier for our total OSTI. Okay, line 5A, these are only for tips. And people who get paid tips are people like waiters and waitresses and busboys and busgirls, which does not apply in this case. So we're going to leave it blank. And notice the instructions say do not enter a 0. So we're going to skip that. Now let's go to taxable Medicare. For our purposes, everything is taxable for Medicare. So to calculate the total taxable Medicare, you take 10,140, 10,650, 12,450. In other words, total gross, which is the same as this number, 33,240. Okay, and then we multiply by 0.029, which is double the 1.45% because we're calculating the employee and employer portion all at the same time. So this 2.9 is actually just double the usual 1.45%. When we do the math, we get 963.96. Okay, so here's what we owe for OSTI, here's what we owe for Medicare, and then here total Social Security Medicare taxes. So it says take column 2 right here and add up lines 5A, B, and C. So just add those two numbers up and we get 4945.6, 4.60. All right. And then it says total taxes, line 6, total taxes before adjustments. So take lines 5D, right here, we just calculated, and add it to line 3. So this is FIT, and this is Medicare and OSTI. So we take these two numbers, add them up, we get 10,112.6 or 0.60, same thing. So line 6, this is what this 941 form says we owe for FICA FIT. All right. Now we're going to go down and look at the whole 941. So we just did line 6, total FICA FIT the company owes, but that might not be what we paid. So let's scroll down to line 11. Line 11, it says total deposits for this quarter. Okay, so what this means is what did we actually pay for FICA FIT? So line 11 is what we paid, line 6 is what we owe, line 7A is going to be the few cents difference, if any. So how do we calculate how much we paid for line 11? So even though we can't get to line 11, we have to kind of know that that's what's to be expected. So to calculate line 11, what we actually paid, we have to go back up here and look for our cash transaction. So here's cash. So we're going to take 3814.74. Here's another cash payment, 3253.47. And then our last cash payment, 3044.43. If we add those all up, for line 11, we get 10,112.64. Again, that's 10,112.64. So if we paid 10,112.64, but we only owe 10,112.6, what's the difference? We're going to put the difference here. Well, the difference is 0.04, 4 cents. So the government realizes that we're going to be, due to rounding, we're going to be a few cents off most likely. And why is it a few cents off? Well, remember this form, we calculated OSTI once and rounded once. We calculated the Medicare and rounded once. And if there's any tips, we would have rounded once. So at the most, we would have rounded 3 times. But when we did the employees, these employee OSTI and Medicare calculations, look how many times we calculated just for OSTI. 1, 2, 3, and then for Medicare, 4, 5, 6, and that's just for one payroll. And then we had to do the employee portion. So that's why there's going to be a difference. Now, you can ignore this line 7B through 7G. These are advanced topics for a tax class. This is not a tax class. We're just talking about payroll, so we ignore these. So line 7H says total adjustments, combine all amounts, line 7A down to 7G. So 4 plus nothing is 4 cents. Now my instructor tip said, my accounting lab, even though my accounting lab says do not enter a 0, there is the exception. The exception is line 7A and 7H. So if you're doing the random version of the problem and the amount you owe, line 6, is exactly the same as the amount you paid, line 11, do put a 0 in here. So notice my tip says if line 7A is 0, do place a 0 on 7A and 7H. So then we check our answer. We're kicking butt. So line 8 says total taxes after adjustments combine line 6, what we owe right here, and 7H, and we get 10,112.64. Earned income credit, that's an advanced topic. We leave it blank. Total taxes after adjustments, line 8 minus line 9. So we get 10,112.64. And then line 11 is what we actually paid. We already calculated that, 10,112.64. And balance due, there's nothing. The government's going to forgive us this 4 cents. Actually, we overpaid the 4 cents in this case. So if we underpaid, they wouldn't pay us the 4 cents. They just forgive us that. And then we're done. There's no overpayment down here, and there's no balance due, because the government realizes that you're going to be a few cents off and they don't care about this. So in the real world, if you're doing this and this is hundreds of dollars, then you've calculated something wrong and you need to go check your work.